Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you joined us wherever you are. We see you joining us from all over the world on goodlifetelevision.org. We're grateful. We're talking about the good stuff. We're talking to great people. It's been a lot of fun, and we're so glad to have you. You can also find at goodlifetelevision.org, we have the full form interviews as well as what we call power clips. We kind of break those interviews up into some of the great moments. So we hope you'll join us there. You can find us on all the social media platforms, and we're grateful. I'm really excited about my guest today. Linda Purl is with me. Linda, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Linda's an actress and singer and has a long and great, wonderful career. I told her before we came on, you're looking at like the biggest Happy Days / The Office fan that may exist. And my family's like obsessed with The Office. So when I told them that, Pam's mom is coming on, they didn't believe me at first, but here she is. I was going to ask you first, before we get to some of your work, I was reading about you. You grew up, you spent some of your early life in Japan.
I did.
How did that kind of affect your life?
Oh, sure. Well, it's funny. A couple of days ago, I was at a kind of reunion with some childhood friends from Tokyo. And whenever we do gather, we all say how lucky we were. Our collective parents were in industry in Japan, and by collective, I mean folks really from all over the world. It was a big inhale for Japan at the time. This is the late 50s, early 60s. They were emerging from the scars of war and were looking profoundly to join the 20th century. And so there was a lot going on. It was a time of tremendous growth and curiosity and a very, very steep learning curve for everyone. So we grew up, my sister and I grew up in a very unusual sort of privileged bubble, I would say. It was global. There were 34 nationalities, I think, in the school I went to, very ecumenical. There was, Hindi and Jewish and Christian of every Christian denomination, and Buddhist, obviously. And so we all just were in there, Muslim, all together. And I think that was such a tremendous advantage for us as we now are living in a global reality in the 21st century. So
wow.
It was very influential in the way that all of our childhoods are. But that experience in Japan only existed then. Of course, it's moved on to other kinds of cultural influences and a different time. I went back there a few years ago and walked through my childhood neighborhood, which when I was growing up there, we were the only foreigners there. There was only Japanese spoken on the street. And now I went back and gosh, there were all kinds of languages. There were all kinds of foreigners and of course, Japanese, but I sort of felt like we were accidental pioneers just through the grace of our parents' careers, that we were there. We didn't know it. We were just living our life playing, hopscotch on the street as kids, but we were kind of very unofficial ambassadors of the West. And that imprint has just moved forward. So, I mean, in the way that all of us stand on our parents' shoulders, I felt like in some way, the generation now is standing on our experience.
Wow. And you came back, you came back to a boarding school but you were acting early.
I was. My parents were theater-centric people. They were, and also part of that sort of inhale of curiosity. There was the Bolshoi Ballet and the Kirov Ballet and Royal Shakespeare Company and plays from Broadway. And often there weren't really that many hotels to stay in. And we had a big old rambly house with bedrooms tucked away here and there. So for the most of my childhood, there would be some artist waking up, at the breakfast table from who knows where. Dancers and designers and actors and painters and sculptors and teachers and whatnot. So
wow. So you were around it a lot.
I was. So I started working in Japan, and there weren't that many families who lived there for as long as we did. So I had continuity there for 15 years, and I spoke the language and was interested in the theater. So, and between that and the Japanese being interested in the West, if there was ever a role for a blonde person who spoke Japanese, I would get it. Not because I was any good, I was just the only one around. So that was my training, and I studied there at one of the dramatic academies, and so that was kind of how my entry point into the arts.
You have, obviously you've done like hundreds of things, but I was going to ask you specifically about some of your work. You did a little Matlock with Andy Griffith. You worked with Ron Howard and Henry Winkler on Happy Days. Of course, my favorite, the great Steve Carell. Well, what can you tell us about Henry Winkler? What can you tell us about some of these kind of legendary guys that you worked with?
One of my favorite things about Henry, who's now really a lifelong friend. I mean, I've known him since I was 18. That was a long time ago. Is that Henry is so grateful to his fans. He's never, ever, right from the get-go, never lost sight of the fact that it was the fans that put him where he was. So he's had a very robust dialogue with his fan base, and that's just out of sheer gratitude. And he's a hardworking guy. Actually, all of them. I mean, Steve Carell falls so much in that category. And when I went to work on The Office, it felt very similarly to the atmosphere of Happy Days. It was Happy Days. The comedy was very light touch. And so Gary Marshall, rest his soul, and Jerry Paris, our primary director, rest his soul too. They just knew that they had to create and nurture an atmosphere of silly and childlike qualities. So nobody brought their garbage to work. You crossed the threshold of that soundstage 17, and that was it. It was just everything that needed to be left outside was, and so we just had delight, a delicious delight in each other. And it felt very much that same way when I joined the cast of The Office. I mean, I joined quite late, and it could have been at that point, they had ridden such a gorgeous wave of success. They kind of could have been jaded, but it wasn't that way at all. They all turned up like it was the first day of school. And I mean, everybody joined in that, but like any organization, it starts at the top. So I have to credit Steve with that. He was very focused, very, very diligent, very, very present and caring about the work and everybody. So.
And you at Happy Days, you started with kind of with the maybe season 2 or something. I think it was when you were, and you played Gloria. Did you know at that point? I mean, was it big at that point? Was it unclear whether Happy Days was going to take off, or where was it when you first joined it? It
was just kind of coming along. I mean, it had a nice first season, and it had been doing well, but the success was growing. It wasn't anywhere near the meteoric success one of the things that happened is that it was Ron Howard's show. It was meant to be Ron's, centering on him with all the ancillary characters. And that was lucky for me, because that's why they needed ancillary characters, particularly around Richie. But as the show started to develop, it was the Fonzie character most unexpectedly that took off. So, and Ron was at that point was starting to lean towards directing a little bit. So he was, gee, what a shame that didn't work out for him at all. But, so anyway, the supporting characters around Richie just weren't needed anymore, because they were putting so much of the focus onto Henry or onto Fonzie. So that was I was out of it.
And then you became Fonzie's girlfriend.
When they this is however many years later, and there was a casting notice that came out, and that was drawn to my attention because it said they were looking for a fiance for Fonzie. They were looking for a Linda Purl type. So I said,
Oh, really?
agent, well, see if you can get me in the door for that. And I auditioned along with 500 other women. And anyway, I was lucky to get it, but that would have been pretty depressing if I hadn't.
Right.
But also, it meant that Gary had to be okay with me coming back now, albeit years later, as a totally different character.
Right. Right. Yeah, I didn't put that together for a little while, but then I finally figured it out. And was The Office as fun as it looked? I mean, you mentioned that the culture was a lot like Happy Days, but tell us about a little bit behind the scenes at The Office.
Well, there was a lot that was unusual about it to me. For one thing, I had anticipated that there would be a lot of improvisation, which is terrifying. There's some actors that like that. I don't. I'm allergic to it. It's just like scary. So, but in fact, that was not the case. Although it looks like that, it looks very loose, but no, they were very, very strict by choice to stick to the lines. And what was very improvisational was that usually when you're shooting, I mean, you're sitting there in front of a camera, you have a set place and you have set moves and you have marks on the floor that you hit so that the camera can move and everybody can stay in focus. It was not that way at all on The Office. There was always another character in the scene, unseen, that was the cameraman. He was strapped with a camera on him. So he would move. We never had marks on the floor. It was a dance. And this camera operator at that point, he'd been doing the show for so long, they sort of knew each other's moves, but he would, in essence, breathe with the cast members and just intuit who was going to have a look next or who would be next. So he was moving and you had to adjust your body position for him so that he could get in there and get the close up on somebody or get the earlobe of somebody else or the smarty pants remark into the lens. So that was fun. It was very physically, it was very fluid, which is not a way I had ever even known could be done. So it was a fun set. Most of the cast members were terrific musicians and they bring their fiddle and their banjo and their what's that thing called? Anyway, I forgot now. This is what happens. So there'd be great jam sessions during lunch, and there was a sense of playfulness that I think, then translated to the screen.
Do you have? I mean, you must have. Looking at your credits and kind of everything you've done. I mean, you must have lots of long-term friendships from all these different places. I mean, all these different shows.
It's one of my most favorite things about this industry. We work, for instance, with this show. Well, this is the one I'm working on now in Santa Barbara at the Ensemble Studio Theater. My director, this is my 6th time to do a play with her. I just love her. She's chosen family. My co-star in this, David Engel, has long been a friend. I'm basically a David Engel groupie, so finally I get a chance to work with him. But it's odd because you work together very, very closely for an intense period of time. And it's almost like a quantum thing. The kinds of friendships that you develop working on a play or even a movie for a month bear little relationship to how much physical time we've had together. I mean, when you work, someone is putting clothes on your body. They're sculpting clothes to your body. They're putting makeup on your face. When you're working with your fellow actors, you're totally dependent on one another. I mean, if you're gonna swim, you're gonna swim together, and if you're gonna sink, you're going off the cliff together. So, you share the fabric of humanity together in a way that doesn't happen that quickly in normal life. And so those ties are very, very, very powerful and long lasting. And so even though it's very much a gypsy life, people are working all over the world and different mediums. But whenever you see someone with whom you have worked, there's this other thing that you get, treasure really, that you
That's beautiful. Well, we're going to bring in, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to bring in Jenny Sullivan, the director, and David Engel, the producer of Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical.
Co-star.
Pardon me, yeah, co-star. Sorry,
Not
yes,
produced and hasn't produced, but he's the
yes, got it. Yeah, co-star. Yeah,
Right.
I'm really excited to talk about the Rosemary Clooney musical. So Linda will be with us. We'll be right back. Stay with us. David Engel and Jenny Sullivan will join us in a moment.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Good Life. I have Linda Purl has rejoined me, and now we're joined by Jenny Sullivan, the director, and David Engel, the co-star in Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical. So welcome, guys. Quickly, David is a Broadway singer, actor, dancer, 6-time winner of the Ovation Awards in Los Angeles, given by the Los Angeles Stage Alliance. Jenny has a distinguished career as a film and television actress as well. And they're now all here in Santa Barbara, California, where I'm sitting. And they are about to bring us this new musical, October 7 to 24, 2021 at the Ensemble Theater. So maybe I'll start with you, David. Coming from kind of your background, what kind of drew you to this project?
Actually, they just called me because I was referred. But what interests me is I love Rosemary Clooney. I mean, who doesn't? She's an American treasure. And but what is exciting about this for me? So Linda is Rosemary. I play everybody else in her life. So I play actually 13 other characters. So I've done other shows where I play multiple characters, and it's really a lot of fun and very challenging. And we're finding it. Jenny and I are, discussing all the characters, and I'm helped out with, accents and different voices and body language that changes these characters. But because I play Linda's psychoanalyst, psychiatrist, and the whole show is a kind of therapy session. But I suddenly turn into these other people in her life, her husbands, her priest, her mother, her sister. I play everybody. So that's really challenging and really fun for me.
And Jenny, what excites you about this whole thing?
Well, I think it's a story that a lot of people don't know. Rosemary, they have an idea of Rosemary Clooney, and this is a much deeper look into what made her the woman that she became by the end of this play. And it'll be very surprising, I think, for people. The music is fantastic, and the story is really rich and deep.
Yeah, I was telling you these folks before we came on, I knew who Rosemary Clooney was, and I knew, of course, White Christmas and so forth, but I didn't know a lot of this story and kind of her somewhat difficult life. I mean, there was addiction, there was mental health challenges. She lost her sister really suddenly. There was a lot of suffering that she endured. And Linda, tell us a little bit about your thoughts going into this, and in terms of your playing Rosemary. What excites you about this?
Well, pretty much everything. David and I both, and I think Jenny too, had the privilege of knowing Rosemary. And so there was that. And it was, in my case, it was sort of unusual. I came to know Jose initially, and two of her sons. We worked together in the 80s. And then the friendship just kept sort of folding in. Another one of her sons, Gabri, was my pastor in Beverly Hills for years. And so, of course, and he's married to Debbie Boone, which is your friend. I'm sure David's worked with Debbie a bunch, a fantastic singer. But Rosie was, of course, this was later in her life that I came to know her. But her house, she had sort of an open door policy at her house in Roxbury Drive. So we got to spend some time there. And my son was friends with two of her grandkids. So even when we happened to be in New York at the same time, and Rosie would swoop all the grandkids up and my little boy, and she'd take him to FAO Schwartz for the day. And they'd come back exhausted, on a sugar high with just presents and presents. She was Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny all in one. And anyway, but as you have those, you see her interact with her family. And I've told this to David and Jenny, but at some point I was at her house. It was a party, and it was just a not a good time in my life. But I thought I was, I had everything covered up and shiny and smiley. And I passed by Rosemary, and she grabbed my hand and she looked through me and she said, "Keep singing, baby. The music will never let you down." And I knew in that moment, I was getting a big life download. And that was, so 26 years ago or 20 years ago, she said that. And that statement keeps coming back. It's like, oh, that's what she meant. That's what she meant.
Wow. So I didn't realize that. So you knew her. I mean,
I did, but that was Rosemary's life. She had a big embrace of people and friends and family. And so, yeah, I was like David, very lucky to know her.
yeah. And Jenny, what can fans, what can the audience expect? As you kind of tease this or talk about this, what can we expect at the Ensemble Theater in mid-October?
Well, you can expect a very multi-layered performance from both my actors. And the whole design of it should be pretty magical in terms of moving in and out of the music and the storytelling. And the storytelling does get pretty dark and heavy, but it also is very entertaining. And there's a lot of humor and wonderful dancing in it. And what can I say? The music, people will go out sing. I wake up singing some of these songs.
Yeah.
God, it's just amazing how that happens. I mean, I hear them and then I wake up and I'm singing them in the morning. Yeah. So it's going to be a real awakening for people about her. And then there are a lot of people who don't know Rosemary Clooney that I've talked to, younger people, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to be really a surprising treat for them and a cautionary tale.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, it just in this particular time where it seems like mental health, some substance issues, some of this, it just seems like it's more prominent and prevalent than ever before. Yeah. It seems like there is a lesson there probably.
At the first read through of it, I said to everybody, the production team and the cast, that it's the perfect play to be coming back with, because we've all survived a very rough year and a half, almost 2 years. And we were supposed to do this play in May of 2020. So it is a play about survival. It's a story about survival. It's one person's, but it becomes the universal story that we've all gone through. So I think it's the perfect event.
Wow. Yeah. I do have a love for Rosemary and what she did in relationship to brain injury. I actually have a brain injured daughter who had a stroke in the womb, actually. But I know that after she lost her sister, that she did a lot of work in that area. And so I've just a side note, but I have a soft spot for her. David, how in the world do you play 13 characters? What's that like? Have you done this before? 13?
I haven't done this show before, but I did a show a couple years ago called Fully Committed, and it was 37 characters. It was a one-man show. It was just very schizophrenic. And with that, and same with this, it's not the memorization. We have the time, and I am learning it all. It's just remembering, who am I now? And then once I get into it, I mean, yesterday I had to play this announcer guy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing him I'm thinking, I had him as a different person doing, oh my gosh. So it's just trying to get him straight. I was doing the wrong accent with the wrong person. And I go, oh my gosh, I'm doing Bing Crosby now, not him. And so it's a little schizophrenic, but it's fun, and it's actually pretty funny. But by the time we get there, I'll have it. But I enjoy the challenge.
I just want to see you do the George Clooney part.
George isn't in this.
I figured he wasn't, but
their Uncle George. I play Uncle George Clooney is actually named after. I do play Rosie's and Betty's Uncle George.
Oh,
And
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Yeah,
George isn't anywhere in this.
Yeah, I figured. So, just to reiterate, the show is Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical at the Ensemble Theater, October 7th through 24th here in Santa Barbara, California. How do people get tickets, just as a side note?
Well, you can get them on the website for Ensemble, which I don't have right in front of me. And there's also a box office phone number. I believe the box office is open from 12 to 5 every day except Sunday and Monday. And then it opens an hour before a performance. I'm saying this off the top of my head, but I think
okay.
That's
we'll put some of those details out when we push this
Okay.
out. We can
Great.
find, but the Ensemble Theater.
A
Right.
vaccinated card. You need to have your, just bring your vaccine card
Right.
so that you can attend.
Right. Got it. Talking to the three of you, just reading about the three of you and these, like, all the work that you guys have done. I'm totally not in this world that you're in, but I'm so curious about it. When you look for an actor, for a director, for whatever, is the favorite project always the one you're working on? I mean,
it better be.
Yeah.
I mean, is that kind of how it works? Because I mean, I know you have a lot to look back on, but
yeah,
the favorite one is
you
always...
you have to focus on the work that you're on. I actually, this is my second show back. I was lucky enough to just close a production of Newsies back east in New York, and I was playing the villain in that. But I let Jenny know. I said, I have to focus on this. As soon as I get it open, I can then focus on the next. But once you're in it, yeah, you're 100% in it. And we all have work that's behind us and great things that we're proud of, but it is all about what you're working on, and we're in it. We're these days that we're working right now are just, I mean, we don't have a break. Linda and I are on at all times. She actually has the lion's share. She's I mean, tearing it up. But we are both working the whole time. It's exhausting at the end of the day because you're so focused, and we just have our little breaks, but it is us all the time, and Jenny all the time.
I will say, for me, one of the great treasures for me with each new show is the cast that I get to work with. And I'm so happy to add David to my company of actors that I'm enjoying so much. And I've had the great good fortune of working with Linda several times on some very large, important pieces in our lives. And it's just means so much to be back in the room with people that you can share those deep journeys with. So that's my thing. So
Thanks for hiring me, Jenny.
Thanks for hanging
you guys,
in there.
You guys together thought to do this, right? Wasn't it kind of together you guys did? And for years you've been wanting to do this piece.
Well, we had the play had come to Linda's attention, and we sat around her kitchen and read it with Jason, and my manager was there, and we read it, and thought, wow, this could be really interesting. And we talked to the writers a couple of times, and then it just sort of disappeared. This was a long time ago. And then 6 years ago, a friend of mine at another theater said, I have a play I want to do. And he started describing it to me, and it was this play. So I went, I know this. So that's how it's come around. So it's kind of great to be actually, and I'm so grateful to Jonathan Fox for hanging in there and saying, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to do it right. So Jonathan's the artistic director of Ensemble Theater. So yeah, but it has been floating around our lives for a while.
On the heels of that, I want to give a shout out to Jonathan and Ensemble Theater Company, because this has been an impossible time. I mean, an unimaginable time for the live arts, and many theaters have folded, but this one didn't. And that's because everyone involved made sacrifices. Jonathan, especially their donors, their board, their subscribers have stayed with them, and therefore it has managed to survive. So we really want people to come in and support this. I have to say, it's very emotional for all of us to be able to be back in the rehearsal room doing what we do. And there's just nothing like the experience of live theater.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, if you're in the Santa Barbara area, if you're in the LA area, come on up October 7th through 24th, the Ensemble Theater. You can find your tickets, and I think it's going to be fantastic. Tenderly, the Rosemary Clooney musical. David Engel, Jenny Sullivan, Linda Purl, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll
Thanks.
see you next time.
Okay. Bye.
This is Good Life TV. I'm Dean Wilson. We exist to inspire you, to encourage you, to educate, to empower. Go to goodlifetelevision.org right now. Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you're with us from wherever you're joining us. Some of you in Santa Barbara on TVSB, some of you all over the world on goodlifetelevision.org. We're welcome wherever you are. You can always find us on the social media platforms, and at goodlifetelevision.org, you can watch the full form interviews as well as a lot of the great, powerful clips that we put there. So check it out, and check out the social media platforms as well. I'm really excited about my guest today. He runs something called Lights Up Productions, and his name is Brent Grosvenor. Brent, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Brent's gracious enough to join us here. He's kind of on a vacation. He's based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota now. And Brent, first of all, just before we get to Lights Up, tell us a little bit about kind of where you were born and raised and kind of your background.
Sure. I was actually born in Idaho. I grew up in Idaho on the Nez Perce Indian Reservation because my parents, who are from California and Arizona, they were pastors. So they went to Lapwai, Idaho to pastor a church. And so I grew up there, even though my parents went through a divorce when I was 5. My mother remarried a Nez Perce, and I grew up just doing music with his band and just kind of living, typical life there and on a res. And so I fell in love with theater when I was in the middle of high school. I got involved in a regional theater in Lewiston, Idaho, and the director there was on Broadway and was a really good trainer, director, and coach. And I started spending 6 days a week in the theater, training there, getting ready to go into to New York City and audition for Juilliard and try to make it as an actor, as a performer in New York City. And I gave my life to Christ. I found the Lord, officially surrendered my heart to the Lord when I was 19 years old, a senior in high school. And at that point, I, flipped the switch. I decided I wasn't going to pursue theater anytime soon. And I went on to Bible school to study theology and actually plan on going into full-time ministry. So that's my first 20 years of life in a nutshell. And then I went into, church staff ministry, pastoral worship, evangelism, working in a couple different churches. I was a youth pastor in New Jersey. And finally in 1997, we founded Lights Up Productions. My wife and I, we decided to go back to my theater roots, write an original musical and start touring with it. And now fast forward 24 years later, here we are. There's a lot to fill in there, but I'm giving you a synopsis.
Yeah, no, let's talk about that first one. So from My Rags to His Riches, is that the one?
That was the first one.
Tell us about that.
Well, the only way to get started is to write one-man musicals. But my one-man shows are not what you might be thinking. We got lights. We built a big set, backdrops, really pretty, elaborate, like 9 or 10 costume changes, and nonstop, drama theater. I would take that thing. We took that thing to churches any place we could, special camps, special events, and performed it in 38 states, 397 times.
Wow.
And then I, quickly decided, I need to write something new. I wrote a show called Sunday in Manhattan about the life of Billy Sunday, the National League ball player turned revivalist, early 1800s he died in 1935. So I did a show on revivals and on his life, did that 223 times, I believe. And then after that, we moved to the East Coast officially, back to Connecticut. My wife is from Iowa, about 30 miles from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So you're starting to see this connection.
I see. Yeah. Got it.
And so we were out on the East Coast and partnered with a large congregation out there that built an auditorium, a $7 million state-of-the-art theater that seated 900 people. And so I started writing musicals for large casts of people, from Sunday in Manhattan to The Richest Man in the Valley was a Christmas musical. And then I was writing this musical set in Las Vegas about the prodigal son set in Vegas. And they asked me to put that on hold and said, we will pay you to write, but we need you to write us a new Passion musical. And so in Connecticut, I wrote this musical called The Passion of the King. And we ran that for 10 seasons in Connecticut. 4,000 people a year come to it. We would sell out every single year. And then I wrote a new one called The Passion and the Cross. And so all these other musicals kept springing up. In 2015, 16, and 17, I wrote 4 musicals in 4 consecutive years, pretty much in that 3 to 4 year period, and a variety of things. So even though most of our shows are for large casts of people now, we have a couple of 2-man shows that I've done, one with my daughter about the life of the Apostle Paul. We've toured around the US, around Europe, much of Eastern Europe, especially Poland. And so really a variety of stuff. I'm kind of all over the map for you right now, but trying to give people a bigger picture of what we do.
Yeah.
And so, our Easter shows, our Passion productions involve about 130 people in those, about 50 kids and 60, 70 adults. So yeah, they're a big deal. We did that Passion show 10 years. We did Christmas shows, and then I have these shows that are written more geared to agnostics and skeptics, such as Lost in Vegas or Mystery, which is one of my newest shows.
I've been lost.
And yeah, that Mystery deals with I play an atheist in that show, and it really helps people deal with suffering and pain and why evil happens, why evil exists, and answers a lot of tough questions for atheists, especially. So anyway, musical theater, a variety of shows that touch on a variety of topics or biblical perspectives on things, or just taking a biblical, like, the Gospels of the Book of Acts, and bringing it to life in a relevant way, so that people who have never been to church and never read the Bible in their life would understand it,
Right. Yeah, that's
and find it personal for them.
Yeah.
So.
I was reading this about on one of your sites here, and I just want to read this. There is a real hunger and desire in the hearts and minds of people everywhere for spiritual things, to know truth and find the answers to life's toughest questions and the meaning of life. Musical theater is one of the best mediums for helping people in that endeavor. I think that's so true. And what a powerful medium that you've latched onto here, to answer questions, ask questions, I'm sure. But so talk a little bit about that, just the power of this medium.
Sure. I explain it like this. The Bible is predominantly narrative already. A third of Jesus's teachings were parables or stories. And so storytelling is already the very, very best framework to work with, in order to present the gospel, or Christian theology or God's truth and God's message of hope and healing and salvation and so on. So then you add music. Music is part of the DNA of every, aspect of the human race. I'm yet to know of any culture, whether it's a first, second, third world culture, that doesn't have music as some part of the culture. So music is, I say it like this, God has designed us to be creative already, because he's creative. We're image bearers of him, to have wonderful imaginations, which is what drives us to discover and explore and learn and create and invent and so on. And so you wrap all that up in musical theater on a stage, which is now live versus a movie or a pre-recorded thing, which is also good. I'm not denying that. But live musical theater, you have all of the elements. It's personal. It's fresh and right there and live and happening in real time. Then there's music, and you can communicate truth to an audience through song and poetry and art in a stylized way, in a way that nothing else can. You can't do it any other way, any better, right?
Wow,
and I've shared this with apologists and philosophers and theologians. I'm a fan of all of it. I'll listen to, the C.S. Lewis or the R.C. Sprouls or the Os Guinness type guys all day long. But the average person isn't going to walk into a building or a sanctuary and listen to Os Guinness.
Right.
In fact, the average person isn't even going to visit a church anymore in Western cultures. So we've got to find a way to get people in seats that is a neutral setting, which a theater is. That's like marketplace evangelism 101. I love all forms of marketplace ministry. But when you go to the theater, which the arts community is by and large, in the entertainment industry, is the backyard of everything that is anti-Christian, right? And that sounds really harsh, but by and large, the entertainment business is opposed to the Christian faith and is hostile to Christianity. That's not really a secret, and you can find exceptions to that, of course. So we're in theaters now. The reason we moved to Sioux Falls was we wanted a neutral setting. We wanted to be at a theater where people from any walk of life can walk in there and sit and hear with these stories and hear the message of hope, the message of Christ and what it means to have purpose and destiny in Christ, identity in Christ. It's a perfect environment for that. It really is.
Wow.
So, and I want to add this too, and I feel very strongly about this. Outside of the church, the arts is the most funded and the most easily funded arena that there is. The sciences get piles of money given to them. Sports has lots of money by the millions, hundreds of millions. But the arts is a very different thing, because people give 30, 40, 50 million dollars to something that's artistic, knowing they may not ever get that money back.
Right.
In fact, they rarely do get it back. I know Broadway is lucrative. There's $10 billion a year comes in through Broadway theaters alone. But an Avengers movie, they spent $400 million on Avengers Endgame. They knew they'd make money. Wow. That's not the best example, but Game of Thrones, which I haven't watched, but it's $1 billion were spent making Game of Thrones altogether. Oh, 1 billion with a B.
Wow.
And so the money goes out there. And so inside the church, the arts, I believe strongly, is the least funded arena that there is. We do all these other good things, which we should do first, I say. We give to the poor. We build rehab programs. We have all kinds of, great ministries and money given to people who are in great need. Missions. We should. I'm all about missions. We spend 10% of the year overseas. But we give hundreds and hundreds of $millions to missions. What do we do in the arena of the arts while our culture is becoming less and less Christian? While you take Europe, where the Christianity first flourished, Europe is now the least Christian continent in the world. Less than Asia, less than South America, less than Africa. Europe is the least Christian continent. Western Europe is under 1% of the population would say that they are born again Christians. And yet the arts is so effective. I found this in Europe, that it is the very, very best way to help people reason. So one of our slogans is engaging creativity and reason. And one of the few people in the last 100 years who really understood this is C.S. Lewis. He wrote Apologetics, Mere Christianity, and other types of books, The Problem with Pain, and really created good philosophical, biblical arguments. And then he wrote super creative stories.
Right.
Narnia is an allegory, and everyone knows what Narnia is about. There's no question. So C.S. Lewis understood this. And so in book form, in the written form, which we still need today, it flourished in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, up until, the 60s, until he died. And here today, we're the year 2021, and we can barely get by to do what we do. I'm not complaining about me. We do what we do, but we could do so much more if investors and others would rally around what we do.
Right.
That same for movies. The Chosen, which I'm a big fan of. Dallas Jenkins is to live action television. I am to musical theater what Dallas Jenkins is to live action television. I feel that way. I want musical theater to be not corny, not cheesy, not churchy. I want it to be really relevant, really good, really professional, really creative, and also super thought-provoking. And I also want the gospel to be clear in everything that we do. Even if it's something like my show Mystery or Lost in Vegas that people should see 2 or 3 or 4 times. It's designed that way, right? So that's a lot of, I'm giving you a lot, but I'm very passionate about this. And so there needs to be more writers and good directors and good material in the world of the arts, because we live in a postmodern era, post-Christian America. And especially after this last 2.5 years that we've gone through, I know just from my circles, people have walked away, either intentionally or just wandered over the last 1.5 years from their faith. And there's a lot to be discussed on that, or around that subject. How do we get them back into a place of walking with the Lord and being discipled? Many of them aren't going to walk back into a church.
Right.
So we want to do our part in challenging and seeing people come to a place of brokenness, even at a show, right? Where they're like, oh my, there is a purpose for my life. There is a designer. There is a creator. I need to get right with the Lord and start walking with him again. And so I think it's key to reaching Western cultures.
That's
not only that, when we go to Poland, which is 98% Roman Catholic, 20%, there's like 20,000 evangelicals living in the country of Poland, 39 million people, same amount of people as you have there in California. But we rent theaters in Poland, and we'll fill them. We'll have beautiful crowds, of whether it's hundreds or whether it's 400 or 500 people in a building. And most of them are Roman Catholic, and they'll weep through our shows, and they'll come to talk to me through a translator afterwards. We use subtitles, by the way. And they're like, they'll tell me that God has deeply touched their life, and that's just cracking the ice,
right.
cracking everything open in their hearts. And so, so theater is effective even in a super religious culture such as Poland.
Wow. Wow. And do churches support you?
Very few churches. We haven't been I'm not very good at raising the kind of money we need to raise. I hate asking for funds. we've been able to manage and get by and do what we do and produce shows, and a few here and there will support us, some strictly for what we do overseas. But now that we're neutral, there's two reasons why it's hard to raise money. Number one is people don't understand the value of the arts and what we do. And I've got hours of video footage and testimonies. I film everything. So that's people, when people hear our testimonies of people who've been in our shows, just the people who have been in the shows, their lives are transformed in a 2-month period of time. There's a lot to be said about that. But the arts is like still a hard sell. Number two is we're not overseas. And so missionaries find it much easier. I'm not saying it's always easy, but they say, we're overseas and we need monthly support and all this. And I tell people, well, we're mostly in America. And it's just hard to convince people that we have tremendous needs. And what we do is very expensive. You know, sometimes some outreaches are very expensive, you know that. And yet all the funding that comes to our ministry goes right into our productions and our ministry, because we don't take a salary from the ministry itself. We've always managed to support myself and my wife and I and our kids who are now in their 20s. We find our support outside of support to the ministry, giving to the ministry. So, but now in Sioux Falls, we are staying neutral in a neutral building. So we're not connected to a local, we're not doing shows in a single church. And so what that has done is it's allowed people who are maybe of a different denomination, or whether they're Lutheran or Christian Reform or Baptist or Pentecostal, to get behind us, because they don't feel like we're just, which is a terrible thing, but this is the reality of how it is. We're not attached to a single church or denomination. Mm-hmm. And so now people are much more open. They're like, yes, we will get behind you. And so we're working on raising monthly support so we can rent like a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot facility. And that facility will become our training and rehearsal space. Mm-hmm. Also used for some storage for props and costumes. And then once we have that, things in Sioux Falls alone are going to explode for us, because the amount of people that ask me, will you do some training for young people? Will you do, can you do more in Sioux Falls and then do more training or preparing to do shows back in Europe, especially Eastern Europe? And my answer is, we're crippled because we don't have our own space. Oh. So when we do these big shows at the Orpheum Theater downtown Sioux Falls, next one is September, this coming September, we're in rehearsals now. And then we can't do anything yet this Christmas, but we will eventually. And then we have Easter again, the Passion in Sioux Falls. We have to scramble for rehearsal space. So we will use the church, we'll use an empty building. We have to rent from the theater itself, and they charge us a lot of money for the rehearsal space. So we're in a growing, when we moved to Sioux Falls, I've always put it like this. We're moving to a city of 200,000 people, which wasn't our first choice, but God, I won't tell you the whole story, but God sort of worked it all out to where Sioux Falls was undeniable. And it is close to her family, my wife's family, Tammy. So she grew up on a farm in Northwest Iowa. And so that's nice. And there was sort of a drive there initially, but we could have moved to Nashville. We could have moved to Charlotte. Washington, D.C. would have been a good international kind of hub. But we're in Sioux Falls, and we really believe it's the right thing. We did the Passion last year for the first time. We were supposed to do another show in Connecticut, and we did the Passion. And I wasn't sure what the turnout would be the first year, but we had 4,200 people at the Passion over 7 nights.
Wow.
And the theater seats 680. We sold it out 5 times and just about sold it out the other 2. We set 50-year-old records in Sioux Falls at this theater. Wow. In other words, people said to me, we have no idea when the last time this theater was sold out, packed out. And they say it was probably, in the 1960s, 70s when that happened last.
Wow.
So
that's great.
It's really amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So we're kind of in a building, rebuilding, or I should say building, expanding and growing place. and we're going to build our team, stay focused in the center of the country. And ultimately our goal is to own our own facility, our own theater, I should say. And all kinds of things could happen in and out of that theater, besides training young talent who really have no place to go. There are very few colleges I would recommend a young believer to go, because they generally get eaten alive in these environments.
Right.
And to do all kinds of productions and events, or even post-production events, like you do a show like Mystery and then have a special speaker for agnostics, or someone to come and have more of their questions answered. Worship events. And so I've told pastors this: imagine a building that's not considered a church building, and yet all kinds of ministry and Christian things happen in that building, not just on Sunday mornings, but virtually nearly every day of the week.
Right.
You know, in fact, a church can still meet there. The general public would not drive by that building and say, "Oh, that's a church."
Right. Right.
I don't think it's necessary,
Right.
especially in the 21st century. And that's my dream. I've shared that vision with a lot of people. I've shared it with pastors, and they're like, "Man, yeah, we need to do this and start thinking this way. Don't change the message. Don't water down the gospel. Don't do anything different except change some of our methods and our messaging in terms of, the way we market things, so to speak."
Right.
And I've shared with investors, and they're like, "I really love this. I'm just not ready to, give $2 million to help build a facility or whatever." They're not saying no, but for the first time in 24 years since we were founded, we're in a position to really have these conversations with people. And in the meantime, we'll just keep doing what we've always done. We have nothing to lose. We'll just do the same things, and hopefully we will do a lot more in my lifetime. So,
well, we wish you well. We're almost out of time, but I love the name, by the way.
thank you.
Lights Up. I was reading, just thinking about light. Without light, we're kind of out of business.
Right. Exactly right. And Jesus said, "I'm the light of the world."
Yeah.
And then he said, "Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven."
Right.
Without light and without salt, there's no hope.
Right. I only eat my steak with salt.
Yeah, that's right. Salt brings out the flavor, as I say, as a foodie kind of person, brings out the flavor. And man, Christians should bring out the best of everything and everybody on every subject.
Yeah.
I could go on another hour on that subject alone, but that's what I do. I tell stories and share, and and do it through music and song, and hopefully we can change as many hearts and lives, change even just the trajectory of as many people as possible. Because sometimes that's all we have to do is change which direction they're pointing, and then they're on a way different course weeks later, months later, years later. So there's more to it than just, we had an event and we had, let's say, 150 people respond and give their life to Christ. That is far oversimplifying the power of the gospel. Yeah. There's a lot to be done, and some water, some plant, some disciple, and we just all have our part. So
it's a very exciting project, very exciting vision, I should say. Brent, it's great to meet you. You're a fascinating and wonderful guy. We'll be praying for you in Sioux Falls. Hope you get the building. If we have any ideas, pass them on.
Amen. I appreciate that. Our next show is September 10th through the 19th, Lost in Vegas, downtown Sioux Falls. Anybody knows anyone out in the Midwest, Omaha, Minneapolis, send them to Sioux Falls.
Sounds good, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
You bet. And thank you. God bless you.
We'll see y'all next time.
All right.